Welcome to the Filmmaker Mixer Podcast, the podcast by filmmakers for filmmakers. My name is Andrew, and I'm joined alongside my co-host Jeff, as always. Jeff and I are writers and directors and passionate about the art of storytelling. Filmmaker Mixer is a creative hub where aspiring and established filmmakers come together to share experiences, insights, strategies, and inspiration.
Hello, everybody. This is the Filmmaker Mixer podcast, and today we are chatting with Michael Shawver, editor on Black Panther, Creed, and the recent box office smash Sinners. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you. How you doing? Thank you for having me.
I'm good. I'm good. So, for those who haven't seen Sinners, tell us what it's about. I'm just kidding. Everybody's seen that movie. It's a great film, really terrific film. But before we talk about that, what I do want to talk about is your background. How did you get interested in filmmaking, storytelling, and specifically editing? How did that start for you?
I think like a lot of, people in this industry, it all started with our love of movies as kids. I would probably watch every movie I could. Parents would rent a movie, take us to the movies almost every week. And feeling that magic is obviously the first sort of kind of thing that I think triggered my whatever was the deep down, need to create. Um, and so when I was a teenager, I'm from Rhode Island where you don't people don't make movies for a living. People become
Sure.
teachers or business people, police officers, stuff like that. But so I was kind of this kid with this way out there dream that, wasn't didn't really seem like much of a reality. But when I was about 14, 15, my parents got one of those big VHS camcorders. And I took that thing everywhere with me and tried to make movies with my friends, and shoot everything. And I really fell in love with creating something and then showing people, friends or family, and they'd be like, "Whoa, you made that?" Or they would laugh, or they would react somehow, and I started to fall in love with something that I created from within myself could create some sort of emotion in other people. And that's a very powerful feeling, and it's a very kind of hopeful feeling. And but at the time, I heard of a director. I didn't really know what directors did. You know what actors do. So when I got to high school and saw that editing was even a thing that existed, and saw got my first look at Final Cut Pro, it absolutely blew my mind. And sort of opened up a different world of creativity. And then, I couldn't let this dream go, and I made the decision I'm going to go to California no matter what, and sleep on floors, do whatever I have to do, work my way up anyway, just to take a chance. There was something in me I couldn't shift courses and do something else unless I had tried,
Right.
basically. So I googled best film schools in the country, and USC came up, and I wrote an essay, not thinking I had any chance to get in, and but I guess they liked my confidence, and I was able to go there for grad school, and like most students, you know you go into film school wanting to be a director or a writer director, because that's really, all you know. But through that program, I was able to find, that joy that I got from creating and from directing, but through different disciplines. And then I was in a directing class my second year, and most student films are about death or breakups because that's the only conflict or pain people really know at that point. But there was one guy in the class that was just making profound things and things about, social commentary, and, sometimes with no dialogue, 5 minutes short, that would make you want to cry at the end of it. And having fallen in love with how to sort of create this emotion in audiences, I always saw movies as something that you could, you know, whether it's inspiring people or teaching them, new stories they never learned about, letting people walk in different shoes, different walks of life. That's always what I wanted to do with movies, something that could really affect people, and maybe shift some perspectives here and there. And this guy was making the kind of thing I wanted to. So and I wasn't the person that was the first person at the networking events or going up and meeting everybody and talkative. I kind of stayed in the back and listened and took it all in. But something in my gut said, you got to go talk to this guy. And that turned out to be Ryan Coogler. And, I said, hey, I can edit a little bit. I don't know how. I love to work with you. I know how to edit a little bit. I love to work with you. Um, and so he eventually got selected to do a short film and at the school, and he selected me as his editor.
Wow.
And from then on, it was just working as hard as I could because to me, he's always been kind of next level and just unbelievably good at what he does, and such a great human being, and so humble that my once I got that opportunity, it was my job to then work as hard as possible to just kind of meet him where he was. And I think over the course of the years, through working with him on his projects and then going off and working on some other great projects with other great filmmakers, I was finally able to reach, in my opinion, the level of editing I needed to really help him achieve his vision. And I think we got there on Sinners.
When it comes to building tension, how do you as an editor decide what not to show as opposed to being overt in what you're showing in a scene?
That's a really great question. Um, it's all about you know the pieces of information at our disposal, and what the relationship is that the audience has with the movie. In my perspective is that there's an energy on screen between characters with sort of the pacing of the movie, how fast it moves, shot selection, things like that. But the other very important relationship and flow of energy is between the audience and the movie. And I think what we do at first, really is cut it with everything in, and take a look at it and see how it feels. And the simplest way is if the audience already has a piece of information that we've said in a line or in a shot earlier in the movie, and it's being repeated again, then you don't really want to say it, more than once. So then you decide, okay, do you want this to be a reveal? Um, and you're always sort of walking this line between intrigue and confusion, and you don't want the audience to dip too far into confusion, but you want them to kind of be engaged and holding on to you know to what you're saying. And I think with Sinners, um we pushed our limits of comfort when it comes to explaining things,
How do you mean
working
exactly?
on movies.
Yeah, can you explain
Well,
explain what you mean by that?
yeah, yeah, yeah. So on movies like Creed and Black Panther, there's a lot of explaining of things as they're happening, and it's because of how broad those audiences are, trying to hit all four quadrants, for kids, for older people who aren't into comics, but we want to make these movies for everyone. So sometimes you have to remind the audience what the mission is that these people are going on. If what Because superhero movies and things like that are actually very, very complex. So in a lot of ways you want to simplify them. In Sinners, the setup was it was simple enough, but we realized that our superheroes in this movie were the characters, and the actors who portrayed the characters. And throughout the whole post process, we tested the movie dozens of times, and the one thing that was always consistent was how highly our actors scored with all the characters. And setting up the simple premise of these brothers coming back to town. There's danger where they were, there's danger where they are, and mainly Sammy and what he wants in his journey. It's a very simple setup, and then throughout the scenes, not over explaining everything that was happening at the time. Having, whether it's in the Southern 1930s vernacular, of different things where I'll be honest, there were a lot of times where, I've even heard after the fact where people watched the movie several times because they didn't feel like they caught everything. And we didn't care that much about it. We actually wanted people to, in a way, have to lean in a little bit more forward and kind of discover the stuff for themselves. Um, and you know, Between the amazing performances, the beautiful footage we got, the next level music we got from Ludwig, and then Ryan and myself doing our jobs of keeping the tone of the genre and building the tension in these moments, just giving the audience enough to raise their hopes and fears without over explaining what was happening, and then letting things unfold, and letting the audience, trusting the audience more than we ever have, of loving these characters as much as we do, fearing for their demise, but also hoping for their survival. We really leaned on that, as opposed to, trying to connect all of the dots at every single moment for the audience to completely follow it. We figured we had a lot going for us in every department that we could get away with it. And once we started testing it, and being in those audiences and hearing people have an interaction with the screen and say, no, don't do that, or laugh or make comments out loud, we found this great balance of audience engagement, um, where we held their hand when we needed to, but we didn't have to, all the time. If that makes sense.
No, it does make sense. I'm curious about something else. We're
Yeah.
so used to fast-paced editing in a lot of these action films, and I'm curious. There is something nice about letting a scene breathe in the right moment. How do you make those
Mhm.
decisions, or even can you articulate it? Is that an instinctive thing, when to keep the pace kind of fast, or is it? What am I trying to ask? I guess I'm asking about your creative process. What makes you decide to
Yeah.
let a scene breathe or make it tight?
A lot of it is the job of an editor is to sort of live in the macro and the micro, of everything kind of at the same time. And so the first pass is instinctual in a lot of ways. And the more scenes that I've cut in my career, and movies I've cut, you kind of recognize, different moments that feel the same as other ones, or and that just speaks to universal humanity, conflicts with loved ones, family members, significant others. Um, but we found that when when you truly go through the character's perspective in terms of the pacing, and in terms of the emotion of the scene, is when these scenes sort of feel engaging and timeless. And there has to be an honesty to the human behavior, and to the reactions that they have, where we want, just like in life, when you experience a moment that's very tense or scary, time can seem like it's taking forever. In other ways, when you're having a blast, time flies by, and in that sort of way, time is relative in the experience of it. And so connecting what that character is going through and what that moment feels like in an emotional way can help create that, for the audience. And um, we put that in, and we have all the best intentions of what we want the scene to feel like, what we think it should feel like. But then we watch the movie as a whole, and the first cut of this was, I think, 3 hours, which is actually pretty short for one of Ryan's movies. They tend to be really long in the assemblies. I think Panther 2 is 4.5 or something. But you watch it and you feel it out. And as an editor, I've trained myself to sort of flip a switch of being consciously working on the movie, but also taking it in sort of an alpha trance, like we would in the dream state when we actually go, sit and enjoy a movie. And the more we watch it, feel it, and we make the changes, um, but honestly, we can only take it so far as filmmakers, I think. And that's why we have test screenings. The test screening process can be difficult. And sort of to your point, one of the main notes we got on this one was just get to the vampires quicker, get to the vampires quicker, get to the vampires quicker. And we started to go down that path. But something in our guts just told us this isn't right. Like, this just, know, we're making a movie that's, you know, about these people and these relationships and about this world. And, you know, specifically in the Sinner's process, we got to a cut we really liked, but then when we started testing it and getting notes from outside, things started to kind of push us into the move things faster, cut things cooler and exciting, and we had versions that, would intercut all the characters even more, or cut out a lot of those early scenes in the movie and just get them to the juke and get them to the action genre stuff. And interestingly, Ryan and I, we got to a point where we didn't really have perspective, and luckily we had a few days off for the Christmas holiday. And once we reconvened and jumped on a FaceTime, we both looked at each other and said, we can't cut this movie this fast. We have to let this breathe. We have to live with these characters. And I said, look, if I'm, I got a 9-year-old son who's in all sorts of activities, and I work long hours. So if I go pay my hard-earned money to go watch a movie and it's in a time and a place that is really interesting that I don't get to live in all the time, and characters that are really cool that I've never really seen before, and I'm learning historical things. I want to live there. I want to be there for a while. And so luckily we both realized about the same time that we had to do this movie, justice in terms of, we call it taking your medicine. There are people that say, "Oh, it's too slow at the beginning" or whatever, but you gotta take the medicine, because if you don't care about these people, then when everything goes wrong, then it's just another movie that you're kind of watching fun, flashy, things happen. So, and in terms of that experience and when to slow things down, speed things up, cutting for an emotional way, it's all about, you know, relating the human experience. So we put in, when we shape a scene or structure it or pace it out, um, we put what we think the experience is like for the characters on there through our own experiences in life. And therefore, because as human beings, we all deal with similar types of things. The hope is that if we feel the emotion, if we can laugh, if we can be scared, then other people who go see it will. And there's a bit of faith that comes with that.
Right. Makes sense. Makes sense. I want to pivot over to more of the mechanics of it. At what
Yeah.
point do you start editing? Are you editing while dailies are coming in, and are you editing as you go, or do you wait? What's the process like?
Yeah, so almost every movie now I start right when they start shooting. So they'll shoot for a day. Excuse me. Sinners was a little different because of the film formats, and that takes a little bit longer to process, and had to be shipped from Louisiana to Los Angeles to develop and then get ingested. So it was it could be a couple days before we saw the digitized footage. But yeah, and so I'm there at the beginning on Cine specifically. I was on set for a lot of the first couple weeks, and with all the visual effects and the twin aspect of everything. Ryan really valued my opinion on set of, okay, this feels really good, so let's kind of center the rest of the shots and the rest of the coverage on this take that we feel is the best. And those decisions kind of had to be made, early on. What ended up happening was, with the amount of time I was spending on set, um, you know, the question was, well, when is the actual movie going to get cut? And the time that I would have to sit and be with the movie and build a relationship and be in a flow state, and put what I can into it. And so, being active and watching the dailies and cutting things and assembling things right away. So then, I could talk to Ryan and say, hey, is there any way we can get one of these shots? Is there any way we can get a close up of this? I feel like I'm missing this, and we need this for the scene. And the best relationships I have with directors, we have an open dialogue, almost every day about, okay, well, what is this going to feel like? What is that going to feel like? But even for the director, Sinners was hard. Sorry, that's my Rhode Island accent coming out. It's wicked hard. It was hard for a lot of reasons, because we're fighting sunlight. We're shooting in Louisiana where it could rain at any moment. We got gators and snakes on set, and it was hot, and the bugs, and it was crazy. So having me there and editing these scenes together could show production like, hey, this was a hard day, totally, but we have a scene and it's great. So keeping a morale, and so much so that at one point Ryan, asked me to cut a sizzle reel This was probably like 5 or 6 weeks in, and they were about to go to night shoots, which are no fun and nobody's really looking forward to. Um, but he asked for me to cut basically like an extended trailer of everything we had, to then show the crew to get them excited, to keep them going. So in a way, with the editors being the first audience, we're able to sort of keep this macro view of yes, we know it's hard. Yes, you're in all the details, but what you're getting is good, or not, or it's not working, and we have to figure something else out. And if I were to wait, the only times I've ever not edited while they were shooting were maybe indie movies where they couldn't afford to have somebody on, the whole time. Um, but it's really beneficial to have somebody in real time, kind of take a look at things. And then the director and the cinematographer and stunts, everybody can come and take a look and see how things are feeling, and Ryan can see a scene and come up with an idea that is different than he had originally planned for later, and it's sort of a live, organic, constant evolution. So yeah, I'm usually involved, from right from day one, and actually before, and a lot of times with prep and you know whether there might be previs on a movie. The Panther movies, they give us animated sequences to kind of cut together to see if this stuff is going to work, see if these big action sequences are going to work, beforehand. So it's great to be valued in that way of being sort of a part of the team, and an in the moment contributor, I guess you could say.
That makes sense. Makes sense. Well, before we wrap up, I have two questions. One, for people who want to
Yeah.
follow your career and see what you're up to next, how do they do that? Do you have like a social media account where people can see what you're up to, or do you just stay in your editing
Yeah,
room?
it's instinctually, I like to just put my head down and do the work, and I love what I do, and I love working with the people I work with. Um, but I have an Instagram. It's Michael Shawver at Instagram, or whatever. It's Michael P. Shawver. If you search for that on Instagram, and I'll post clips from podcasts, photos, every once in a while, or like on location. Not, got to be careful with the information you put out there,
Sure.
into the world. But yeah, so that's sort of my access to the world at large. And I got to say that the response to Sinners was is still mind blowing to me. And how much people took ownership over the movie, between the cosplay and the fan fiction and the posters and the animated it was just it was so wonderful to see. And knowing how much work we put in, and how personal this movie was to Ryan, was I was glad I was on social media at that point, put it that way. But yeah.
Well, one last question. Thinking back when you were a kid and you had that VHS camera running around, what was the first film you made?
um it was a James Bond spoof called uh, called The Man with the Plastic Gun. We were just kids, and we just had plastic guns. And it was a comedy. Like, the villain had a checklist: destroy the world, kill Bond, pick up bread and milk for mom. You know what I mean? Like, just that kind of, that airplane, Naked Gun kind of, hot shots type out there comedy. But what was interesting about that was, at that point, I thought all movies were shot in order. This shot is shot, and then they move to this shot and they shoot that shot. And, because I didn't know editing was a thing, but I remember being frustrated because I wanted to shoot a scene with two of my friends, but I couldn't get them in the same place at the same time. And so I said, well, there's got to be a way to do this without that. And so I shot them separately. And then what I did was I took the camcorder and set it up and framed up on the TV, and figured out the delay between pressing play on the VCR to play the footage, and to record a new one on the thing, and then press the music in the background and go. And I would stay up all night and edit in this weird way without even knowing editing was a thing. And then showing people that, and being like, wow, you know, this is pretty good. Like, you did this by yourself in in the basement with a camcorder and a TV. And, you know, it was a huge step in sort of the, you know, encouragement and growth that I had of this could actually be a real thing that I did, you know.
That is cool. That is cool. Well, Michael, it's been a pleasure chatting with you, and best of luck.
Yeah, you too.
Best of luck of all the things you're working on in the future. And if you ever come down to Austin, you look me up.
Awesome. Sounds great. Thanks so much,
All
Jeff.
right, buddy. You take care.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you for listening to the Filmmaker Mixer podcast, a podcast created and hosted by filmmakers Jeff Stolen and Andrew Lamping, and produced by Melody Lopez.
Our theme song was composed by Stephen D. Bennett.
Make sure to follow or subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to us on, and stay tuned for future episodes.